All right, good morning, everyone. It is right at here at 10:08 a.m. I do hereby call this May 10th meeting of the Industrial Development Board to order, as we do have a quorum. Second item on, so we'll go with the agenda, moving on to item number 2, consideration of prior meeting minutes. Yes, so the ones that are in front of you, Latanya, we've already approved those.
Yeah, that was my fault. I printed out the ones that Joyce sent me that she had just done. And
So-
I didn't realize that, guys had already approved them, so she'll be here today and we'll get clarification.
Okay, sounds good. All right, item number 3, Chairman's Report, I'll move that to the end. Although this is not on here, we typically always have a public comment period anyway. So certainly if there's anyone here on the public that wants to speak, we give you 3 minutes. Okay. All right, we'll move on to item number 4, items for consideration. A vote by the board is required. At last month's April 12, 2023 meeting, the board approved the amended economic impact plan for the Madison Station Economic Development Area, Madison Statement Project or Project. With that, the board agreed to execute a project agreement with the developer for each of the project's 3 phases, Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. The project agreement details the roles and responsibilities of each party for Phase 1, which generally are: 1, the developer will cause the construction of public improvements, roads, sidewalks, and other public infrastructure, and also cause the demolition, site prep work of the project area. And 2, the board will issue its non-recourse note, and for this non-recourse note, the proceeds will be used to reimburse the developer for its eligible costs spent on the project. Reminder, the board will pledge the property tax increment revenues that it receives from Metro to the repayment of the note. For additional details, please see summary of the Madison Station Project Phase 1. All right, so want to thank our legal team, thank Latanya, and also the developer for getting these documents together, getting those out to everyone last week for Tom to review. We obviously have Jim Murphy. I see Jim Murphy here in the audience representing the developer. The developer is also here as well. Jim, if you will, obviously you have been before us quite a few times. What I'd like to do first is give you an opportunity before we get into the documents that we're approving, is kind of just review this summary document, Phase 1. I think that's very detailed and just kind of giving an update on what's happening in the Phase 1 process. Obviously, you come before us several times and explain that this project will be done in 3 phases. So hit us with some of the key points, such as, the affordable housing piece in Phase 1 is 28 units. And then we can also talk about maybe some historical TIF deals as well.
Sure.
As background for the board.
Sure. So this is, as the summary mentions, this is Phase 1 of the project. And Phase 1 is located up in kind of the northwest corner of the site. There's one existing small building that's there that will be demolished as part of Phase 1. And Phase 1 will basically constitute multifamily housing and amenities for the residents that will be included in the project. As you mentioned, a minimum of 28 units will be affordable. There's a possibility we'll be doing more than 28 units for affordable, but at a minimum there'll be 28 because we committed to have at least 10% of the total units, which is 170 total units for the 3 phases. And so that's the plan is to include some, maybe not. We might have as many as 170, but we might only have 28. So right now we're still working on finalizing the details. Obviously, my client is not going to develop that property, and so they're not the affordable housing developer. They're going to have an affordable housing developer work through that, and that will, they'll make the determination of the final number of units that will be affordable versus market rate. This will include an extension of the current Madison Station Boulevard to accommodate the multifamily site. We'll need to subdivide the larger property into, so we'll have a separate lot. We'll have to allocate, we worked with your lawyers on the language, allocate the base tax from the overall parcel to the new site so that we can make sure that we've got a proper allocation of the base tax for the first phase, the first site, and then we'll have 2 more sites later. But basically, what we'll do is the developer will develop a site. Included in the development will be the infrastructure and the demolition and the site preparation, which will be eligible cost. When the project is completed, we will then come back to you with the documentation showing how much eligible cost was expended and bring to you the proposed reimbursement agreement, loan documents for the TIF loan. The principal amount of that loan cannot exceed $5,238,780. The maximum contribution, which includes interest, cannot exceed $17,209,000. Costs in that $5 million number, we can't get reimbursed, but for that $5 million principal amount. And the large interest number is taking into account the concern that the increment might not materialize as fast as we wanted it to, and so that's why we asked for a 30-year term for the TIF loan so that we can make sure that over that 30-year period, there will be enough increment to pay off the lender.
Can you pause right there?
Yeah.
So that's actually a good leads into
Good
this.
stopping point, right?
So Vice Chair Siegel brought this up. I will pass this around. Very short article if you want to see that. But this is an article from February 2023 in the Nashville Post speaking about the Bellevue Mall redevelopment. Quick background. That was a TIF deal that actually came to this board. I want to say the amendment came to this board when I first started, circa 2015, 2016. And just big picture I could speak to is it was a mall, it was a traditional mall. And certainly early 2000s, I spent a lot of time going to Bellevue, and so I saw the gradual, really not gradual, it's really a pretty fast decline of restaurants leaving, the mall being vacant. And then lastly, it was Sears, and which was great because you could get your tires there. You could get, if you needed pillows while you're in college, mattress, you could get it. And they held on, but then it got to the point that even, Sears, that you would go there and there wasn't a lot of stuff there. So if you haven't been to Bellevue, I would certainly ask folks to go take a look at it, because it's certainly transformed with the movie theater, the restaurants, the apartments, and certainly the Predators facility as well. But in this article, it speaks to how, again, these are estimates. They're not always exact. But again, as this article states, even though the incremental was short, there's no recourse to Metro, no recourse to the IDB. But this is an example of that. Vice Chair Siegel, you want to talk about this? So is there anything else you want to add on what's going on with the shortage? Anything else besides what's kind of in the article?
Yeah, I don't think I realized this is on the agenda today, so pardon the lack of concrete details.
Or we can wait till.
No, y'all know how I feel about not having exact numbers. It makes me nervous. There are 7 or 9 tax parcels at the Bellevue Mall. Not all of them have underperformed, but there was a combination of 2 factors that went into that default. One is that there was a one-time COVID decrease for certain types of properties, which greatly affected some of those parcels. In particular, the movie theater received like a 50% discount during the reappraisal process, which was standard and across the board. And Josh, if I'm misstating anything, please jump in and correct me. Josh and I, we all met with the tax assessor's office. So if I'm misstating it, y'all please jump in. And I'm so short, I could hardly see you over there.
There you go.
And
I was gonna say something, but
but
we had
Latanya
training.
and Josh, please correct me, like, just interrupt me if I'm misstating anything. So the COVID assessments hit that property really hard. That was a one-time COVID assessment adjustment, which probably some folks on the board are familiar with. When you reappraise, it has to be consistent across the board. So it didn't have to do with that particular property. It was just every property in that class in the county received a COVID adjustment on reappraisal. And so that significantly reduced the tax revenue for that property, for the parcels affected, for the next 4 years. In addition to that, the owner of the property appealed the valuation of that property, despite having a pretty recent sale of at least one of those parcels for a significant amount more than the appraised value. The appraisal process obviously is not it's not one in which we're represented or we're notified of, but it also is a neutral process. It's not adversarial, so it's not like Metro can, argue like they were right, and we don't actually have the money to do the legwork necessary to figure out that we were right, because it's so expensive to do those appraisals and to present evidence. Some of those appeals were successful. Had those appeals not been successful, there would have been no default. Had there not been a one-time COVID reduction, there would have been no default. But the combination of those two created a default. And I'm not familiar with that deal. Typically, TIFs last longer if they're not paying what they need to pay out, right? Which is why on this one, there's like this delta we talked about. There's a wide range sought to make sure that the developer is made whole. And there's very little we can do on the reappraisal process to affect the value of the property, because it has to be by class, and it has to be countywide, or sort of district-wide. But so that is what caused that default. It was those two factors combined. Obviously, COVID is a unique situation. There certainly are things other jurisdictions do when it comes to appeals that we don't do. Those would be, making the appeals process more open when it's a TIF property, or some jurisdictions, they don't even allow you to appeal. I don't know if we had some questions as to whether that's legal under Tennessee state law. But that's sort of how Bellevue got to where it is today.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, this speaks to, these are estimates. You're talking about estimating property incremental tax revenue today for something that's happening in advance. So this speaks to that. And just the actual number of the balance, according to this article, was almost $46,000. So again, this is part of what happens. And Jim and you and I have discussed, there are certain things that lenders can do to protect themselves, but ultimately, tell me if I'm looking at this the right way. It's an investment, so lenders are loaning money to a developer. They're lending that money based on the incremental tax revenue. They understand that they're estimates, and if they're still willing to loan the money, then to some extent that's a risk. For just like any investment, there's a certain inherent level of risk. Is that, am I thinking about that?
That's correct. There's a couple of things I mentioned one, and that is the longer term to try to.
In this case,
to make sure we can avoid getting into a Bellevue thing. The other thing we're doing is we're not taking the money before the buildings are built. We're actually gonna build the buildings, so the lender will have a really good idea of how much increment will really get generated before we come in and do the loan. So that's another protection in the way we've structured this deal, is to basically not take the money up front, but take the money as a reimbursement. And that way, before you approve and before the lender makes the loan, they know they have a pretty good idea of what the taxes are gonna be generated. So if the taxes aren't gonna be sufficient to cover the loan over a 30-year period, the lender's not gonna loan it. And so we'll have to come in and say, okay, we can't get $5 million, we've gotta get something less. So that's another way we've structured this deal as a reimbursement, so that you don't have as much risk, the lender doesn't have as much risk. The problem, if you do it on the front end, a lot of lenders will say, well, we don't know how much taxes that project's gonna generate when it's built, so we wanna create a big reserve fund. And so instead of being able to use all the increment to be able to fund reimbursement or fund the upfront cost, you've got to put some of the money into a reserve fund so that there won't be a debt service default. The other thing lenders can do is they
Can you pause on that? Because I think but again, that's a lender decision.
Yes,
That's
that's
not
right.
that separate.
That's right.
And is that similar, equivalent to you hire a GC for construction and there's contingency in the deal?
Basically the same.
You get the
It's the
payouts.
same concept.
Right.
It's basically, we're not sure how much you're gonna generate in revenue from this tax every year, and so we're gonna, instead of giving you 100% of the increment, we want you to put 15% of that increment in a reserve fund, and you can only use the remaining 85% for your reimbursement of your cost. And so that's pretty common, and that's one of the reasons why we've worked on these reimbursement structures, because the lenders are, what happens in a lot of those deals where you get a loan up front is you can only use part of the increment, but if you get the building built and get it stabilized, you can go back and get the lender to basically give you a new loan based on the actual numbers, and you can eliminate that reserve fund. We've taken that step out just by saying we'll upfront it, and then we'll come back in and do the reimbursement after the building's built, because then everybody knows kind of what the property's gonna generate. And there won't be the lender's risk is reduced, the developer's risk is reduced, just the government's risk, although they don't really have any legal risk.
Sure.
Because everything says everything is non-recourse to the IDB or to Metro, so.
But it's certainly for this board, and I would say to this board, a lot of the deals or these types of matters that come before this board, they're long-term. This is potentially a 30-year payout, so there's certainly a huge responsibility in that. So I guess the other benefit from a non-legal perspective is when you come back before us for phase one, we can actually see this is built, like
Right.
it's done. There's actually some impact to the community,
Right.
the affordable housing units you said
When
you
we
would
come
do,
for the
they're doing.
reimbursement, we're gonna come with hard and fast cost, and there'll be improvements out there that you can see.
Yeah, and I would just add that, from a assessment perspective, that's really helpful too, because knowing those costs sets the assessment at the right number to begin with, and when we don't capture that right number to begin with, then that's when you see long-term spirals, because you can never pick that up on a reappraisal.
So that's part of, and again, we structured all this before that story came out. This was not in response to the story, but we knew that these risks were out there from doing so many deals, and we have found that having a reimbursement structure always works better for both the board and the company, because the company typically can get 100% of the increment, for the purpose, there's not a big reserve fund, because the lender knows what the taxes are gonna be. And also, the community knows it's a real performance-based incentive. If we don't build it, we don't get any reimbursement. So it really does align everybody's interest a little bit better. So that's the way we structured this deal, and I think it provides the protections that you would need to make sure that on our deal, we're not gonna have a problem like Bellevue did.
Yep. And talk to us about timing, just the board, it's in here, so you're planning on phase one?
Phase one, we hope to have, complete the construction by end of June of '28.
And when do you plan to start?
Well, that's a good question. We don't have a date right yet. I mean, as soon as possible, but, we're still working with all the issues that everybody's working with in this space right now, which is construction costs.
We call them challenges, right?
Yeah, construction costs going up and interest rates going up and
No more free money.
all those things factoring in. So that's why we added some extra time, just because the recent increases in the market we had hoped to be able to do it about a year earlier.
Sure.
And with all the uncertainties in the marketplace, we're having to push it out a little bit.
Absolutely. And then just big picture, tell us, so obviously this board originally approved the economic impact plan in December of 2022. You have to come back before us because of some needed amendments. We subsequently approved the amended economic impact plan at last month's meeting. What's the update on where you are in the process
I
with
think
Metro
it's gonna be
Council?
on the council's agenda for next week. And
Okay.
so what we're asking for y'all to do is approve this, subject to that being approved by the council when it gets approved. But that's not uncommon. When we did Oracle, we did the project agreement and the economic impact plan. at
It's
the
all
same
in
time.
one.
Yeah, so it's not uncommon to do that. It's just, we kind of got off track because we were hoping to get the project agreement approved at the same time at the last meeting, but your legal counsel asked for some more time to review and make comments, which we were happy to do, and so we worked through with them, incorporated their comments in the documents, and
No, it goes with attorneys.
hey, we all have our job to do, and they did a good job.
All right, before I ask Josh to comment, I'll start. Well, any questions related to so there's two documents, really, Josh, if I'm understanding this correctly, let me know. There's two documents really that the board is being asked to approve today. It's the project agreement, which the declarant is an exhibit to that, and then also the resolution, correct?
Well, essentially, the resolution is approved.
Oh, okay.
Of the project
Okay,
agreement, so.
gotcha. Okay. And lastly, get into the declaration, because I think that's relevant, essentially a deed restriction, so talk to the board, because we've been very intentional and supportive typically of affordable housing development, so.
And the way
talk
that
to us
the
about
economic
that.
impact plan provides that the units will be affordable housing or artist or senior housing. And so the declaration is set up to create a mechanism to limit it to artist, senior, or affordable housing. We had to create a mechanism to review artists, because that's not, who's an artist? Everybody says, well, I'm an artist, I'm one of those. So we created a mechanism which we modeled off one MDHA had done at Ryman Lofts as the process that they created for that project to determine that people were real artists and not, just claiming to be artists. But our goal is to try to have as many affordables as we can. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the artist and the senior are viewed as being kind of, if we can't get enough affordables, then we'll look at those. But the reality is we're going to try to do as many, if not all of them, as affordable.
And what that does, this declaration is essentially deed restricts the property in case it changes hands.
Before we can convey any piece of the property, we'll have to put the land use restrictions on it. That's correct.
I want to thank you for doing that, because I know that we hear a lot of feedback around town that people promise affordable housing, and then there's not affordable housing, or it's suddenly
Or it changes hands.
STR,
Yeah.
and there's no way to enforce that, so thank you.
We've walked down this road a little bit, and
Just once or twice.
And also, we got some input from folks at Metro about, what they were doing with the Barnes Fund and things like that, and tried to model to be similar to that, so that we would have so that this project wouldn't look significantly different from what Metro was doing in the projects where they were doing grant funding for affordable housing. And so that's how they're doing it, or basically how they're doing it. We had to tweak it a little bit because they're just giving money, and it's not, but anyway, at the end of the day, yeah, I think we've got it in a format where it will happen. It will have to happen.
Yeah, that's good. It runs with the land. That's the key.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's the key. So runs with the property. All right, we have to develop. Do you have anything you want to say to the board, or I know you've been up before us again, but anything
No,
you'd
man.
like to say?
Yeah, I think Jim's pretty well handled everything there, but I just want to thank you all again for the consideration.
And this is Tyler Cobble with the Cobble Group. He is part of the development team,
Local.
the local part.
I'm the
That's right.
local guy.
Yes, sir.
Boots on the
Absolutely.
ground.
All right. Well, thank you for coming. Appreciate it, you being here. Thank you, Jim. So before I ask Josh for any questions or comments, are there any questions here to my left for Jim regarding the project agreement?
It's been very thorough, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I just have a question about the affordable housing. Is there a term on that deed restriction?
30 year.
30 years? So even if it changes hands, it would apply?
Yep, which is awesome. It's running
Yeah.
with the property, with the title. To my right, any questions
No question. Great project.
or comments?
Just,
Well, go ahead, but I think I know where you're going, but, or maybe not.
so, if Artesia is the master developer, and subsequent phases have other developers, how does this,
So this obviously is just for the phase one, but what we've done is the document provides that Artesia will basically work, if they will either develop or cause to be developed phase one. So if they have a affordable housing developer that does that, they'll enter into an agreement with the affordable housing developer to do the work and then document the cost that Artesia will then bring back to the board.
so do those costs then reimburse Artesia or reimburse the Artesia with the separate developer?
Artesia will have to do an agreement with the developer to flow those funds downstream, which they anticipate doing.
And how do you, I guess in reading the project agreements, it said that there were certain interest rates set on those, but they couldn't exceed 6%.
That's right.
How is that worked out? Is that a separate process with the
All
lender?
that will be done when it comes time to come back to the board for the reimbursement loan. That's when we'll bring the loan documents that set out the exact interest rate and those kind of things. But that's on the back end when we're doing the reimbursement process.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Vice Chair Siegel.
You said something that I just wanted to add on Bellevue. That's really important because the property owner that appealed those taxes was not the property owner that we entered into an agreement with. So it was a subsequent owner, right? So the point is you can do all the due diligence in the world. We can have the best people in front of us who we know and trust, but at some point things sell. So that's all.
Absolutely. Josh, as our legal representation, obviously you and I corresponded on this. Also asked, just so the board is aware, we also had the Carpenters review this document as well, because this can potentially, they'll be coming back to us and potentially issuing bonds. So the Carpenters also reviewed this as well. Josh has reviewed this. Josh, any other comment, or do you have any comments you'd like to point out to us on the document?
No comments. I think Jim pretty well laid it out. As Jim mentioned, he did give us some additional time to review it, and excuse me, a little hoarse. But we think it's in good shape, and so if you guys are inclined to approve it, we think you're good to do that.
Okay, all right. So, if anyone, so a couple items, just very quickly, discussed this, shared this at the last meeting. I potentially have an indirect conflict. Again, not direct conflict, but indirect. So I shared that at the last meeting. And I guess with indirect, you can still vote if you wanted
Still
to.
vote, yes.
I typically don't vote unless there's a tie anyway. So probably we'll see what happens. But I do want to disclose that. Are there any other disclosures?
I also have a conflict.
Is that direct or indirect?
Direct.
Okay. So direct conflict, just since we just did our training recently, direct, you're saying you're not voting.
He is not voting.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. With that said,
I move to approve the motion.
I'll second it.
okay, so we have a motion to approve, proper second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so I think we have 4 approvals, 2 abstentions. Is that, do we have to have 5?
I think you need to vote.
Oh, okay. Let's-
I was,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, chair will vote aye. We'll approve.
I
So,
was like,
5 approvals, then one abstention for the record. All right, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. And briefly, just moving on to the chairman's report, I just try to keep the board up to date on various items I think are relevant to this board. One, the Dominium development that this board approved some bonds for at 900 Cleveland Park on Dickerson. It's really humming and going. I was actually, I don't drive on the interstate that way a lot, but I did the other day, and so I saw it from the interstate, the rear. It's really going up. I've been corresponding with them. They reached out to me recently, said everything's going well, so I'll certainly provide an update, to this group as it becomes available. But if you're over there, take a look at it. They're really moving on that, so really exciting. And again, affordable housing project that came before this board. So happy to see it coming to fruition. Also, let me see here. 1, 2, 3. Mark, were you on the board when we did the Oracle deal? That was right before you, right? Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. The four of us were talking about TIFs, kind of a reverse TIF, but it's been 2 years. As amazing as crazy as that seems, it's been 2 years since the Oracle deal was approved. There's a good article in the Nashville Business Journal last week that I saw. They just talked about the Oracle deal, what's next, the things that they need to do. So pretty cool article. Some just high level items. Just talked about how Oracle has spent nearly $270 million acquiring the 70 acres of land between Cowan Street and the river. So that was pretty interesting. In this article, it talks about some of the challenges. Obviously, kind of the work environment has changed to some extent. It's a different world than it was a couple of years ago. Also talks about the same thing, Jim, that you mentioned with construction costs. Those are things that Oracle is considering. And then this article, I thought was pretty cool, lays out some of this checklist, so I won't go into every detail, but Oracle still needs approval from the Planning Commission and Metro Council on final design and scope. They need a formal participation agreement with Metro that governs construction, maintenance of public works, and other infrastructure. And then they talked to us about this a couple of years ago, was the sewer situation. So the infrastructure deal the infrastructure that they will be putting in place includes a pump station that will handle 30 million gallons a day. So that's a lot. So anyway, pretty cool article. It's just good timing. Again, it's been 2 years, and obviously that was something that came to our board, and obviously a high profile deal because it had to come before the board, before the council, and in my time on the board, that's the only time we've had the mayor at our meeting. So I think that says a lot about the Oracle deal. So again, well, certainly as more information becomes available, at some point would like to have Oracle's team here to update this board just on progress at some point in the future. I do know several years ago, I know that I met with Oracle's team, and several other board members may have done that separately as well. But very good meeting, and they seem to really want to be good stewards and partners in the community. So just want to share that with the board, and I think I have extra copies of this article if you'd like to see it. So anyway, those 2 items, and then I brought this up recently at the last meeting. I talked with the Metro team about this as well. Probably at an upcoming meeting here very soon, potentially next month, if we would have the Metro incentives deals come before the board for potential approval. Again, these are the annual incentive payouts for the companies. Last year, we kind of did that later in the year, but typically we try to do that in the spring. So just know that that's coming up here soon. And some of those deals have obviously fallen off, but we still have Phillips, HCA. This is their last year that HCA would come before us. Phillips still has a couple of years. Rhonda, is Bridgestone, have they contacted you about reporting this year?
They are not reporting.
They are not reporting. Okay, so it would be Phillips and HCA. And then I did share this with the board, but just as a reminder, Alliance Bernstein has started their clock on the jobs grant in 2023. They reached out to me earlier this year, had some conversations with them also here recently. So they will not be submitting this year. They'll be in front of the board next year to submit for 2023, but just an update on that. And then Amazon, certainly, this board also approved Amazon cash grant incentive several years ago. I think a couple of us were on the board. I think Christina, myself, and Quinn, I think, were on the board for that. Amazon has not yet started the clock. So just know, again, with those job incentive grants, if they're 5 years or 7 year deals, once the company starts the clock, then if they don't submit for a year, then they basically lose that year. So again, I would just say to this board, we approved the Alliance Bernstein deal several years ago. They're just now starting the clock this year. So I'm sure that deal will be coming before the board likely, where many of us probably won't even be on the board anymore. So these are very much long-term, impactful decisions that this board is making. So anyway, just want to share that with the board. I thank you for everyone's time. Josh, you had something?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, speaking in the affordable housing industry, a lot of other IDBs across the country have a lot of innovative programs and products to help bolster affordable housing, and I think we owe it to the community to figure out what within our charter can we do under Tennessee Code Annotated that would further bolster what the Barnes Funds are already doing and what MDHA's LIHTC pilot's already doing. Because from every person I speak to, I mean, I had a community meeting for another project this week, and it's the first time ever that everyone was in favor of it. And that has not happened. So that really speaks to the need, and also speaking, like, again, every big bond deal that got done last year, new construction, had Amazon funds. So what happens if Amazon doesn't come through and provide more loans to make those deals pencil? So it's just thinking about what can we as a city, as a board, help with the community. Maybe that's creating a bond issuance that's a soft second loan program or something to kind of fill those gaps that do arise.
So thank you for sharing that. So obviously, you actually came to speak to the board. I asked you to speak last year, even before you were a board member, due to your knowledge on affordable housing, and we had a meeting dedicated to affordable housing last year. And not just affordable, right? Because we use that word affordable, but it's truly workforce housing, right? It's not just people that don't pay anything. You've got people that are teachers, first responders that, I mean, you look at rent, you look at housing costs that are really rising. So I agree with you. I think one of the things, so I think there's a couple of things that, and I'll just share with this board, as I shared last year, and maybe I have in previous meetings, I spent a lot of time last year based on the feedback from this board about wanting to do more affordable housing developments. I spent a lot of time last year just on my own talking to a lot of developers like yourself. And as I shared, certainly a lot of developers here for affordable housing go before the Health and Education Board. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's not what I'm here to get into today, but certainly part of it was just letting developers know that they could even come to the Industrial Development Board. So a lot of developers, from what I found, didn't know that we could even do that. I think so. Let's have some more conversation about that, and certainly what I would love to do is let's put some time on the agenda here at an upcoming future meeting. Go ahead.
Wait, you can finish.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I chair the Habitat for Humanity right now, and I know for our situation, we cannot find land that fits the need of our ratios and so forth. And we're working to see what land's available that we can get from the state, the city, or what. But there is a new, I don't know if you know this, the new alliance for affordable Nashville, and it's, if you give me a second, and it was just announced, the formation of the Alliance for the Affordable Nashville scheduled to go public. The Alliance is a coalition of 10 of the city's longstanding nonprofit housing developers as founding members, including Habitat. And I got that from our president, Danny Herron of Habitat. So again, we collaborated with the developer who bought the old Lebanon outlet, and Habitat got space for their restore, but working with developers to see what land's out there, that we can get a piece of their land, that their tax incentives for them. So again, building the conversation to see what the incentives are for the developers who out there, so that the land can be made within our ratio of how we do our work, but everyone has a different formula. So I think if we're gonna do anything, we gotta understand what we can give and what those are. I don't even know all that, but what is our role and how do we support them? So.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And like I said, because of this, like I said, I spent a lot of time, last year and into this year, just talking with a lot of different developers, just letting them know that this was something that this board could even do. What I will say, a couple of things. One, I think we've done hopefully a good job of establishing a relationship with Dominium, which has been good. So I think that will help us. And certainly, I had the opportunity to speak at the grand opening for their other project on North Dickerson. Vice Chair Siegel was there as well. So I think those kind of things are beneficial. Those are items we've done that can propel us to do more in the future. And then the other piece of it too, and I work in real estate and was doing a lot of work in Nashville here, since the market has gone crazy. And yeah, the cost of land it's skyrocketed. And Dominium has even shared that with me, because in my subsequent conversations with them, we chat periodically. Hey, can you guys do more? Like, let's go. We're ready. Let's go. And that's one of the main things they've shared with me. And so what I would also say to this board is this is where like the Madison Station piece comes in as well, because I don't know if Madison Station would work if it was, and I don't know, but just from a number standpoint, I don't know if that works solely for affordable housing. If we're only going to, if the way to solve affordable housing in Nashville is only doing 200 plus unit developments, those are great, but that's not going to get us there. So part of it is doing projects like Madison Station where, yeah, it's going to be a redevelopment, it's going to be retail office, but hey, we're going to also have affordable housing units as well. So certainly being creative on that front is something that, in projects like that this board is obviously supporting. So
Can I just add a few things that I think are
Absolutely.
really important? Because this is May, and we started this conversation in June of last year. So we've been talking about this for a year. We've been talking about fees. We have been talking about what we can do. And while we've certainly done a lot of research before this board, the actual action steps have not progressed. And I think while conversations with developers we know are great, that's not the best way and the most efficient way to spread the word on these programs. It's going to take a comprehensive look at our website. What applications do we have? What information do we have? What do people know is available that they can publicly access without just having the benefit of knowing somebody on this board? I know that other IDBs are doing a lot more work in this state than we are on these issues. And it's not just housing and nonprofits, it's childcare centers. Like, Lord help you if you are a Metro teacher with 2 kids in daycare, half your income is going to childcare because we don't have enough. But they're doing pilots through IDBs on those in other counties, right? This is a comprehensive issue. And while I think conversations are great, and we have so many great developers who've been here who want to do this, we really need to make pretty quick strides in how do we get this information out there on a more mass basis for people. And I think too, one of the things we've been talking about for a while is seeing if Hannah will come and tell us where Metro is on what is available land-wise. They have been working really hard on that for a really long time, and the intergovernmental conversations that have to happen for this to work, we all talk about needing them, but then we're just not having them.
Can I
So-
offer a little bit to that? Thanks for bringing it up. It just so happens we have an intern this summer who's willing to help out with some of the IDB matters. So once you guys make some decisions on your fees, and we can work on the website, and other information we can utilize on that website, he'll help us, help you rather.
That would be great. And I do know, like, part of this is stalled, right, because it took off under one person who had everything set up to go in July and then gave notice and was gone, and so you have to start from the beginning, but we have to keep that process going because the work we need to do can't just be conversations with people.
yeah, again, I think we've done a lot of good projects. I think we've done some, and we've made some progress, and obviously we can do more. So I appreciate your comments. Appreciate you bringing this up. As far as it relates to application and fees, that will be upcoming at a future meeting. I've talked with, just so that we're on the same page, I've talked with the Metro team and had a conversation with Josh. Obviously, Josh probably hasn't done a lot on it yet, because we had this conversation recently, but I've asked Josh to take the lead on putting together an updated application and reviewing our fees. And we had a good conversation on that. Obviously, we were getting ready for this Madison Station deal, and so I told Josh, look, this is something that the board seems supportive of, so work on this, but that will be the next phase. So I anticipate we'll have some more information on that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We've never had subcommittees, and I think the board made very clear when we had this conversation earlier that we would be interested in that because other Metro boards do have working groups. And if you're just coming together once a month to have one meeting with the matters before you, then it becomes very hard to advance those sorts of things. And while I really appreciate that Josh is willing to take a stab at it, I think we were really clear when we interviewed the carpenter firm that we wanted to know what their expertise was, that we wanted to be able to have real conversations about what that should be. And I think that it goes against the spirit of what this board wants to do and our ability to achieve things. And frankly, it's not really fair to Josh, who's like a Metro lawyer, not the IDB's lawyer, to put it on him to guess what's in all of our brains and what we would support. And I would just encourage the chair to actually take the time to put together the subcommittees and the working groups so we can come in here and have public meetings where we sit here and hash it out and figure it out.
So, great point. So, go ahead, Mark. I'll let you
Just want to
comment
add
before I respond.
to your point, Vice Chair. That's a very good idea because you have right here 3 organizations that represent affordable housing. So we're in the trenches every day. We're buying property, we're trying to develop it, so we can actually help Josh out quite a bit as to what the needs are, what needs to be on Metro's site. The navigation is the big problem about Metro's site, trying to find things that are available. So even if you stick it on there, can you find it? I'm in there all the time, and it's like, gee whiz. So, I think the subcommittee, outside of the regular board meeting would be great. That way we could attack it quickly, tell you what we need, and get it done.
Thank you. So, what's your feedback? So, to be clear, the first step, right, before we talk about the website, is we've got to have the correct information that we want on there. So, Josh is not, just to clarify, I'm not asking Josh to work on the website right now. What we're working on, and I've discussed this with the carpenters as well, so they'll be involved as well. But this is not bringing something to the board and saying, hey, this is what we have to do. Right. But what I like to do.
But with all due respect, we are a board and he is Metro Legal. And if we as a board can't work on this and y'all are going to work on it and then bring stuff to us, that takes away from the spirit of the board, the work the council has done to put us and our expertise on this board.
If you will let me finish, Vice Chair.
I might have to separate you two.
I'm the first person to have said this in a meeting, and I'm sure I won't be the last, but as a board, we are begging to be more involved, and we are not allowed to be more involved, and I think that's a problem.
Well, first of all, Vice Chair, it's not about nobody's be allowed to be involved or not. I'm happy. Listen, if this board would like to set up committees and there's folks that want to do that, I will certainly have Josh look into what is the quorum.
Josh is not the administrator of this board.
But Josh is legal, so if we're going to have committees, there's some legal things that have to happen with
I am more than
that.
willing to step in and help you all formulate whatever subcommittees that support you in your formulation of subcommittees. I will get as many interns as you need in here to help you when you have those meetings, so you can make your decisions and determine your processes, and even help you to document them. So you guys just need to make a decision if that's what you want to do, when you want to do it, and we can take advantage of not just his time for the summer, but I can get you as many more interns as you need to provide you that administrative support. Because at the end of the day, you all know we don't have a staff, but I can get you some interns in here to help you. So just make a decision on what you want to do, and I'll get the support you need.
And the carpenters already been saying that they want to help.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to lose. They put it on the table for us. And if we don't show interest and move forward, they're like, okay, well, I guess Nashville doesn't want to do it. Memphis
Can you
does
repeat the beginning of what you said?
I said the carpenters have, the law firm,
and they're
extended to us to help.
I
want to take advantage of that.
Yes, and that's obviously one of the reasons why this board chose the carpenters. So, listen, this document was this was not to, hey, we're going to do this. It was so that we could have something as a baseline for this board to discuss beyond what we currently have. If this board would like to meet on that first, happy to do it. We can do that. So what I would say is let me follow up with LaTanya on looking at, and Josh, if you can talk with LaTanya on if we have committee meetings, what's that look like? How many people? Do we have to have a quorum? And then what I would say too, LaTanya, if you can send an email out, because we certainly have some individuals not here today, and ask if anyone would like to be involved in this committee, and then we'll go from there.
Make some decisions quickly, because you got summer interns helping out. And again, I can get you some more,
So
but
let me just say this, I mean,
Take
if
advantage
you are
of
gonna go
that.
the committee route, let me take a look at your bylaws to figure out who actually, I'm assuming the chair appoints the committee, so I need to see if there's any processes in there to do that. I think ultimately, I would expect if this works like any other board, you would appoint the committee and appoint members. Obviously, because you guys are a public body, there would be, open meeting laws that you would need to qualify for or comply with, to do that. But it certainly is doable, so if this is something you guys want to explore, more than happy to do it. I know Chair asked me to do a lot of things because there's a lot of legal aspects of what you do, so I'm here to support you, so just know that I am here. Nigel's not impeding on my time when he does that. Obviously, I do have to juggle quite a few things, but I'm here to support you, so I just want to make it clear that if you ever have any questions or concerns, I'm available for you, so I'm more than happy to help where I can.
Yep, okay, so I think we have a plan to move forward. And like I said, there's certainly one of the items that we can come up with, and something I've discussed with the Carpenters as well, is obviously one of the reasons this board wanted to go with the Carpenters, certainly their expertise when it comes to bonds and their work with the Health and Ed Board. So part of the thinking too is that we don't have to start from scratch. We can certainly add in what we want as the board, but certainly we can get together and have some discussions on that. So I appreciate everyone's feedback. Any other comments or questions from anyone? All right, with that, it looks like it is right at 10:59, so we will move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Do you have a copy of that article?
Which article?
Is that it?
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.